From Detroit's Cass Corridor, it's the Metro on WDET. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robyn Vincent. Today on the show, women's sports are gaining fans, but not enough leagues.
So what's holding back the professional pipeline?
Also, from fiber to flame, painting to protest, Hot Damn is not just a show.
It's the sound of a creative institution finding its fire again.
And protest is part of democracy. So why are universities punishing it?
One former college administrator offers a framework for this growing debate.
Plus, our bodies are weird. The way we eat, move, and have sex, even we don't know what we're doing.
Sam Talent makes it all hilarious, sometimes uncomfortably so. He joins us ahead of his performance on Thursday right here at WDET.
But first, the criminal charges were dropped, but the punishments keep coming. In May 2024, students at the University of Michigan protested outside the campus art museum. They chanted, linked arms, and called on the university to divest from Israel. They stood behind barricades. Some video clips reviewed by the Metro show campus cops escalating things, pushing their bikes and barricades into protesters. In another clip, an officer pepper sprays students as they chant and sing. That same month, police violently raided and broke up an encampment at the university, spraying protesters with what students say was a mix of pepper gas and tear gas. Nearly 1 year later, the university began disciplining those involved. Some students were fired from campus jobs. Others were permanently banned from future university employment. One recent graduate was let go from a research position for a protest she attended as a student. Meanwhile, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel dropped all criminal charges she had been pursuing against students amid mounting political pressure and the ongoing devastation in Gaza. But U of M continued its internal punishments, labeling peaceful protests as violence. The university also hired outside consultants and private security to surveil student activists. That revelation was thanks to reporting by Tom Perkins in The Guardian. Here he is on our show after publishing that story this summer.
They're following them on campus, following them off campus. One student who seemed to really be a target said he was followed in teams. Like he would go into a building and investigators would post up on all sides. So no matter what exit he went out, somebody would follow him to the next building, and then they would take up positions around that building.
Now, several lawsuits say the university retaliated against students not for breaking rules, but for what they believe. Joining me now is Liz Jacobs, staff attorney at the Sugar Law Center for Economic and Social Justice, which is representing the students and alumni suing the University of Michigan. And the Metro did reach out to the University of Michigan to respond to the allegations in the lawsuits. We haven't heard back. Liz, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me on.
So, Liz, yesterday I spoke with one of your clients, Henry McKean Shapiro. He's a recent University of Michigan graduate. After joining that May protest and later being arrested during the encampment, he was released under bond. What happened next was caught on tape, not by journalists, but by a private security firm the university hired to track him.
The university had hired a private security firm to follow me, and they saw me between classes going to hand tape to people who were putting up flyers. Despite the fact that I didn't leave campus directly between classes, they considered that a bond violation. The judge ordered me to spend 4 days in jail.
Okay, 4 days in jail. So again, that surveillance, he said, is what led to that time in jail for what he believes was a minor bond violation. I know you can't speak about Henry's current disciplinary case, but more broadly, what are the legal and ethical concerns when a public university uses private surveillance to monitor student protesters?
Thank you so much for that question, Robyn. And it is one that has been extremely troubling to us as civil rights attorneys at the Sugar Law Center. So universities are public institutions. That means they are bound by the Constitution of the United States, which protects the freedom of speech and free expression of all people, regardless of what you're talking about, regardless of how controversial the issue is. We are lucky in this country to have a constitution that protects our civil liberties for everyone, right? So Henry and so many of his peers and community members at the University of Michigan have been calling for an end to the genocide in Gaza, have been calling on the university to divest from companies complicit in the ongoing human rights violations and genocide taking place in Palestine. So Henry and his peers have been facing repression from so many different levels at the university. Some of the most troubling have been the university's use of these private security forces to surveil and track Henry and his peers as they have moved around the university, as they have moved around the city of Ann Arbor, tracking them not just when they're attending protests, but when they're walking to class, when they're leaving the dining hall, when they are meeting up with their friends just to relax on the campus diag. It has been extremely concerning to see the level of repression, the use of these private security forces, the university's multi-million-dollar investments in these private contracts with private security, private consultants, in order to repress, target, and chill the speech of Henry and his fellow protesters.
Liz, so what I'm hearing from you is that a public institution like the University of Michigan should be held to a higher standard of transparency when it comes to outsourcing that kind of power.
Absolutely. Not only a higher standard of transparency, but actually a higher level of asking, why is a university that already has its own police force hiring an external private contractor to track its own students, its own staff, its own faculty members, and its own community members when they are exercising protected freedoms? They are exercising their right to speech. They are exercising their right to protest. What's the purpose of this? As an attorney, it's really concerning to me because that is repression in and of itself. Feeling like you can't walk safely through your community because of what you say. Feeling like you're being watched because of what you believe. Those are already chipping away at our freedoms of speech if we have to look over our shoulder. If we don't know if we can walk safely through our community because a university, a public institution, is investing in private security forces to follow us around, that in and of itself is an act of a public government that makes us feel like we can't speak freely, that can in and of itself chill and silence speech.
And the reason that the university was applying this surveillance had to do with it desiring to apply discipline, it sounds like. And so I want to zoom in on that for a moment. Henry told us it's not just that students are being punished, but that the university is finding multiple ways to layer consequences long after the protests happened.
So right now I'm facing 3 different allegations, which are one related to the University of Michigan Museum of Art protest, which I was already fired and banned from being employed from. Then another one related to the encampment raid, which I was already tried and had charges dropped for. And then also the bond violation, which I already spent 4 days in jail for. So it seems that they're really trying to stack as many punishments as much as possible. And in particular, with those last 2 cases related to what Attorney General Dana Nessel pressed against students, it's clear that since they didn't get the result that they wanted there, but they're trying to find as many avenues as possible to at least salvage any attempt at repressing student protesters.
Okay, Liz, so you're representing students like Henry or alum who say they've been punished again and again, fired, banned, investigated, sometimes after they've graduated. What does that kind of cumulative discipline tell you about the university's intentions?
Great question, Robyn. And it's one that we've really been sitting with. So as you mentioned right at the top, the Sugar Law Center is currently representing students, alumni, and community members of the University of Michigan who have been facing this multi-pronged repression that we believe is coming from the university regents. Very much that belief is based in the fact that this repression is coming from every side of the university. It's not just through student discipline. Students are being charged through a weaponization of student discipline, but they are also being charged as workers, losing their jobs, and actually being told that they can never again apply for employment at the University of Michigan, which is one of the state of Michigan's largest employers, Folks are also receiving trespass bans after they attend protests that are effectively banning them from the entire campus in the Ann Arbor community or on all 3 of the University of Michigan's campuses. So across these lawsuits, what are we seeing? We're seeing a pattern and practice of repression from the University of Michigan targeted only at pro-Palestine protesters. We have not seen student discipline used in the same way against any other protest movement or any other current protester at the University of Michigan. We have not seen workers facing retaliation for their non-work speech. For some of these workers that took place months in advance of them even having the jobs that they're currently in and that they recently lost. We haven't seen this kind of repression. So for us as civil rights attorneys, that raises a huge constitutional red flag. The university is using every tool that it has at its disposal to target and repress a certain kind of speech, right? It's not just that students are speaking on an issue that is controversial on the Israel-Palestine conflict. It is the fact that they're advocating for Palestine and for divestment. And what we have seen, Henry's case shows this really well, is that folks that the university sees as high-level organizers, as folks who consistently show up, who take on leadership in student organizations, who keep showing up to protests, they are facing escalating consequences in an attempt to try to silo them off from the rest of their community, to try to keep them off the campus and out of, the campus community, to not let them be able to speak, to not let them be able to organize, and to try to send a message to other students and community members on campus. If you step up for Palestine, you could face these kinds of consequences. If you choose to speak out for divestment, you could be met by losing your job. You could be met by these weaponized student disciplinary proceedings that can actually suspend or expel you from campus. They are raising the costs of what it means to attend a protest, of what it means to speak out on something you believe in an attempt to try to silence this kind of speech on campus because the University of Michigan's regents disagree with the speech.
So what you're saying is it is the pattern, the sequencing, and the scale that is really crossing legal and constitutional lines. Is that right?
That's right. And we look as well at history. We have seen a strong tradition of protest on tons of university campuses across the country, but especially at the University of Michigan. There have been powerful protests, passionate protests on that campus, going back to the civil rights movement, going back to the anti-Vietnam War movement. And what have those protests asked for? They've asked for meaningful dialogue with the regents, with university administration, the exact same thing that pro-Palestine protesters are asking for. They still have not had the ability to sit down with their regents. They are asking for public meetings to discuss divestment. They have done the research. They're awesome students. They're great researchers. And they have really tried to bring the university to the table to discuss these investments in Israel and in the ongoing genocide. And the university continues to walk away from that, continues to not engage in meaningful dialogue, actually departing from its own pattern and practice of treating protesters like people who are valued members of the community that they should be in conversation with and not shying away from that.
This does track with the 3 students and alumni that I spoke with, and that was one of the things that I asked them was, have you tried to have any kind of meaningful dialogue with the university? And speaking of dialogue, what are you hearing from the University of Michigan? We've reached out for a response from U of M. We have yet to hear back. What have you heard?
So we are still actively in litigation around these issues. So we have 3 lawsuits that are currently moving within the federal court system. All of them have been filed in the Eastern District of Michigan, and we are still waiting to get responses in some of the cases from the university. We have received some movement in the litigation where the university has filed motions to dismiss that are currently before the court for consideration. We believe we have strong cases. We have pled very strong facts. So we look forward to the court reviewing these cases and actually making formal determinations on their continuing progress in the litigation. But it's always a hard process, right? Litigation is not easy. We're not just building a strong case. We're educating the court on a really controversial issue and on really new issues. We haven't seen the University of Michigan behave this way to protesters before. So we have a lot of judicial education to do through these cases as well.
So in other words, you're not seeing any movement yet with the university, any traction when it comes to these lawsuits?
We haven't. No, we're still very much in the normal course of litigation. We're waiting for the university to reach out and potentially come to the table at some point. We're always open to having conversation. Litigation is a journey. It's not just a destination at trial. So we are very open to being collaborative if the university was to come to that settlement table or something like that. But we haven't received any kind of communication.
We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, I'll continue my conversation with Liz Jacob of the Sugar Law Center. Stay with us here on the Metro. Welcome back to the Metro on WDET. I'm Robyn Vincent. We're talking about lawsuits filed against University of Michigan that allege the university systematically retaliates against students for their political beliefs and protest activity, specifically pro-Palestine protests. Our guest is attorney Liz Jacob of the Sugar Law Center, which is suing the school. Now, Liz, we've been talking about one of your clients who I spoke with yesterday, Henry McKean Shapiro, and he spoke about his identity and how his Jewish heritage informs his protests against Zionism and state violence. Let's listen.
What I think the Palestinian cause reminds me of is much more is the history of resistance to fascism, of which 80 years ago Jewish people were a major part of, rather than any kind of uptick in anti-Semitism, which people like Jordan Acker like to cry about. I think for me it's about the history of resistance to genocide and fascism that compels me to participate in this.
Okay, and Jordan Acker, who Henry mentioned, serves on the board of the Regents of University of Michigan, and we should note Acker's law office was vandalized last summer with graffiti. Again, we did contact the university for comment, but we've yet to hear back. Now, Liz, what does it mean when students, especially Jewish students, feel punished or alienated for dissenting from mainstream narratives on Israel?
It's a great question. So many of our clients and so many of the students and community members in the fight for Palestine are proudly Jewish community members, right? They are proud of the rich tradition of their faith and of their community that have inspired them to think about human rights, to center the needs of Palestine, and to fight for liberation of all people. So we would think really deeply about how we support these students who are feeling really isolated and really alienated from their own communities. And I think Henry is a great example of a student who has found community in the fight for Palestine. For so many of these students, of these community members, they have found not just a political home, but a community home, right? The fight for Palestine on the university's campus is not just protests on public sidewalks and speaking out for their beliefs. It's teach-ins on the diag. It is community dinners where they break bread and they talk about their differences. They talk about their values. They talk about the rich religious traditions, whether it's Jewish, whether it's Muslim, whether it's Christian or something else, the traditions that bring them to the table. And I think that's been one of the most powerful parts of getting to see the campus-based solidarity movement for Gaza at the University of Michigan is it's a community of love, it's a community of care, and it's a community that feels so deeply for other people, whether it is the folks in Gaza who now are facing unprecedented levels of starvation, ongoing genocide, and ongoing apartheid, or their comrades and friends who have been facing repression from the university, from the regents, and from now the Attorney General as well. Students are just so rooted in this care and community that I think that's been really powerful to see as they faced isolation from other communities. They have found love, care, and support in the movement for Palestine in Ann Arbor.
In the last 30 seconds that we have, Liz, the University of Michigan has promoted itself as a campus that values protest and free expression. But your clients say that when they spoke out for Palestinian rights, they were punished, they were fired, surveilled, or banned. Legally and culturally, as briefly as you can, how do you interpret that gap between the university's stated values and its actions?
So from the University of Michigan to the Trump administration, there is no freedom of speech if there is an asterisk by that phrase. If it is free speech for everyone except those people who speak out in support of Palestine, then none of us have our right to free speech. That is why this is such a critical constitutional issue that should be enraging every single person in Michigan. As long as some students, some community members, some protesters cannot safely be in the streets without facing repression from a governmental entity, none of us can, right? It doesn't matter what the university says in a press release. It matters what they do in the halls of the campus, what they do on the grounds of the diag, and what they do on the university-controlled property, how they treat their students, how they treat their community members, and how they treat people facing genocide and oppression. That's what matters. And it is that we should be focused on. We cannot claim that the university cares about free speech if they're continuing to repress pro-Palestine protesters.
Liz Jacob, attorney with the Sugar Law Center for Economic and Social Justice. Thank you so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thanks for having me.
The Metro asked the University of Michigan to respond to the lawsuit allegations that we discussed today. We haven't heard back. Up next, a conversation with the former president of Brandeis University on how he thinks universities can respond to student protesters while respecting free speech. This is the Metro on WDET. Stay with us.